So one of the biggest announcements during the recent Nintendo Direct was, of course, the introduction of three new systems to Nintendo Switch Online, and if you have the expansion pack, the Game Boy Color, and the Game Boy Advance. Those are three different systems, folks. I'm going to prove it to you in this video if you don't believe it. I don't know why Nintendo likes to put Game Boy and Game Boy Color, just mush them together and like, oh yeah, it's the same thing. It's not the same freaking thing. But this was something that was very exciting to me. If you have the standard Nintendo Switch Online, you get Game Boy and Game Boy Color. If you have the expansion pack plus, you end up getting the Game Boy Advance stuff. And I really feel like now is the time to get into the expansion pack stuff, and we'll talk about that as the video goes on. But here's a look at what everyone has access to that has Switch Online: the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color stuff. We have Wario Land 3, we have The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX, which of course has some additional content in it, Metroid 2 Return of Samus. I love this freaking game. I love this game so much. The music in the game is so good. Like, I love that song. Super Mario Land 2, the 6 Golden Coins, which is actually the first Game Boy game I owned as a child. I came bundled with a Game Boy that I got for a good report card. Also got F1 Racing, which wasn't a good game, but I convinced myself it was. Tetris, Kirby's Dream Land, Gargoyle's Quest, Game & Watch, Gallery 3, and Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare. So here's where we start to get into, you have to reward Nintendo when they do things right, when they do smart things. I know that I made a video earlier today. If you haven't watched it yet, go check it out, talking about the $70 price point for Tears of the Kingdom. And I did not like that because of the fact that it came out of the blue. But Nintendo went above and beyond with the whole Game Boy stuff on Switch Online. Of course, you have your single player, you can play local multiplayer, you can play online with up to 2 people for Game Boy and Game Boy Color, up to 4 people if you have the Game Boy Advance stuff. But here's where things get awesome, and this is within the settings. You can have different filters just like you could sort of back in the day, but you don't have to buy a new console in order to do it. You have the original pea green Game Boy, you have the Game Boy Pocket, which of course made everything more black and white, and then you have the Game Boy Color. Now, what's interesting about the Game Boy Color is it's not the full range of Game Boy Color stuff. If you had an actual Game Boy Color, you could sort of change the colors to your liking. This just pretty much goes with the default, because every game, well, I shouldn't say every game, most games had a default color scheme, and it would just make it so that it looked as good as it could, and I'll show you guys that in a second. Reproduce Classic Feel adds in the ghosting mechanic that would happen on an actual Game Boy. We're not going to do that, though. Display with small screen. North American versions, or both versions of the game. I like all of this. I like all of this because this is additional stuff that I don't think a lot of us expected Nintendo to, actually do, because it's a bit going above and beyond. So we are going to check out Super Mario Land, the 6 golden coins with the standard thing right now. This is the black and white sort of Game Boy Pocket style. And as you can see, it looks great. Everything has that black and white color scheme, but like, look at how good everything looks. It's nice and clean. You don't have the ghosting, which I guess maybe for a nostalgic rush, you would like that, but me personally, I'm good on that. Like, I want to play these games and have them look, really nice, and I think they did a great job here of making this game look very nice and making the Game Boy stuff look really good. Like, this is an older system that had a super small screen, so to see it, accurately represented with a bit of a modern, touch to it, I think is super cool. Now, if we're talking about stuff like the Game Boy Color setting, I want to show you guys one of those. We're going to take a look at Metroid Return of Samus, and like, just look at this. Look at how nice this is. It has the default color palette. Samus looks like Samus with the color scheme. That's what I was talking about. There was, for most Game Boy games, when you were using a Game Boy Color or even a Super Game Boy, there were default color palettes that were optimized to look the best. And this makes this game look, I wouldn't say modern, but it definitely, adding in the color just adds a huge layer of depth to the game. I feel super underrated game. I love this game. I think it's so much fun. It's a shame that whenever people talk about like their favorite Metroid stuff, they never really seem to talk about this game. It's just kind of silly to me. But yes, great game here. And now to prove that the Game Boy Color is a different system, here's a game you never played before. You've never played this. I have. because I always found this game to be fascinating. But this is a game for the Game Boy Color, the Alone in the Dark game. Now, Alone in the Dark, of course, had a original reboot, like towards the tail end of the PlayStation 1's life cycle. I believe it was like 98 or 99. For some reason, they also made a Game Boy version of the game for the Game Boy Color. But when you see what I'm talking about, like, you're looking at this, you're like, this looks like crap, RGT. What the hell is wrong with you? Okay, let's go ahead and get into the game. Okay, we'll skip all this. You know, oh, it looks bad. It looks bad. You know, who cares? Who cares? Just stay with me here, folks. Stay with me. You know, the cutscenes aren't that great. It's a Game Boy Color. Look at this. Oh, of course, there's got to be dialogue. Look at this. You're gonna tell me, God, stop with the dialogue. You're gonna tell me that the basic ass Game Boy could have made a game that looks like this. Look at the animation on the dude. I don't remember his name. Like, look at the brooding eyes in the background. There's a massive castle that you eventually get into very early into the game. I don't remember if there's like puzzles I have to solve or something. I'm trying to keep this limited, but like, it's such a unique game for the Game Boy Color, and it's like there's no way in hell this would have been on the original Game Boy. So yes, they are different systems. Oh, and this is the combat. Look at the depth of the combat. The friggin', I don't remember the buttons. Yeah, whatever. We're not sitting here playing the game, but I just wanted to show you that. Let's check out the Game Boy Advance though. All right, so we have 6 Game Boy Advance games to choose from: Mario Kart Super Circuit, Super Mario Advance 4, which is Super Mario Bros. 3, WarioWare Inc., the original WarioWare game, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which we'll probably never get another one of those games, The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, and Kurokurokurin. I don't know what that is. They seem to be very excited about it, though. With this, you don't have the same options. You can do the sort of ghosting thing. You can also have a smaller screen, but you don't have the ability to do the whole, you know, changing of filters thing, because the Game Boy Color I mean, the Game Boy Advance was different than the Game Boy Color, and of course, the standard Game Boy. You can do multiplayer, though, with up to 4 people for the Game Boy Advance, so that's pretty cool. We're just going to check out a game or two here just to show you guys how everything looks, because it looks damn crispy, my boy. And this game, of course, is a weird version, an extended version of Super Mario Bros. 3 that they redid for the Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Advance. I keep saying Game Boy Color. I love the Game Boy Color, if you can't pick up on that. But this was a super fun game. If you've played Super Mario Bros. 3, like I'm sure everyone and their mother has, like, you know this is a great game. But like, look at the graphics of this game. Everything looks very crisp, and it's like, you know, I don't think a lot of people would have necessarily expected it to look as good as it looks. I don't know, maybe I'm downplaying, you know, this is Nintendo though, and that's what makes me sort of feel like expectations should have been super low, because Nintendo has a tendency to do some weird stuff sometimes. But with this, it's like they freaking nailed it. Like, they nailed the emulation on all. Oh, that was great. They nailed the emulation on all this stuff. You know, emulation, there's no question. It's great. Go away. I understand how to play. But the clarity of everything, the amount of effort, that's what we're really getting into here. It's not necessarily a, you know, it's the greatest thing in the world that Game Boy and Game Boy Color are now on the Nintendo Switch Online service along with Game Boy Advance. The important part here is the fact that they didn't half-ass this. They could have just done random crap, put these games on there willy-nilly, and moved about their day, but they didn't. They actually put time and effort. I'm actually curious to see how this game looks, because it's been a long time since I've played this game. You know, it's not willy-nilly. It's not half-assed. It's actually work was put into this. They tried to make this as good of an experience as possible, and that's something that you need to reward. That's something that you need to, you know, when a company does good things that are good for the consumer, you know, this looks fine, by the way. You need to reward them. When a company does bad things for a consumer, you need to, you know, be spoken about it, be outspoken about it and stuff. But I think Nintendo absolutely nailed this. Of course, you get into the whole thing where it's like, oh, well, are they gonna, you know, update it? They're gonna add games and stuff like that. And that remains to be seen, you know, how often we end up getting updates for these games, because Nintendo has been kind of slack with some of their systems. You know, a lot of weird games come to it as well. But I think at the end of the day, just the value of both Switch Online and the Switch Online expansion pack has tremendously increased with these new additions. So reward them, reward Nintendo. Be like, hey, this is the kind of stuff we want. This is the stuff we like. We want to see new systems. We want to see new games added to it. We want to see a great value. So let me know in the comment section down below if you plan on checking out these Game Boy, Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Advance games. If you have already, what you think about them. And as always, guys, let me know all your feedback. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are new. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Make sure you watch the other content directly related to the Nintendo Direct, such as my Nintendo Direct reaction and the subsequent follow-up from the $70 Tears of the Kingdom game. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.